Now, The Hunt Palmer Show.
Boy, does it smell good.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
That's good.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio, this is Hunt Palmer.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Thursday. It means we're brought to you by Rouse's Markets. Got Jacob Beck and Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos. And lots to do, as is tradition here on this Thursday. PicKell is going to join us today. Had signing day responsibilities yesterday, but I want to talk the national landscape of college football, the playoff, and what he thinks about the LSU Tigers as they move forward after the regular season in 2024. So we'll talk to JT in 15 minutes. 1:30. I meant to do this yesterday, but we got Brian Kelly on the mic and just didn't have time to get to everything we wanted to do yesterday. So we're going to now go look at my first SEC power rankings and then my power rankings for today and see how those kind of stack up. Should be an interesting exercise at 1:30. In the second hour, I want to talk about LSU at defensive tackle now that the ink has dried on National Signing Day and we have an understanding of kind of what things look like moving into the offseason. Chris Blair is going to join us at 2:15, and we'll talk Saints and Giants at 2:30 as those two teams who have not had a very good year will do battle up there in New Jersey on Sunday. But we start the same way that we start each and every day, and that is, of course, with our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's Opening Drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
Got some bad news that we basically expected yesterday, and I hinted at it on the show, even though I didn't have any information, but I watched and found out that Jalen Reed will miss the remainder of the season for LSU basketball. Matt McMahon and LSU released a statement yesterday. If you were at the game or watching the game on Tuesday night, you saw it. It was right out of the chute. About a minute into the game, fast break opportunity. Reed goes up and lays it in, lands, and buckles. And it was a non-contact injury, and he went down and grabbed his knee and then couldn't put any weight on it walking off the court. We've been to a lot of basketball games, been to a lot of football games. You watch that, and you got a bad feeling in your gut as it's happening because you feel like you probably know. And you can hold out hope for the best, and Matt McMahon went to the podium after the game and said that it was a sprained knee for Jalen Reed, and I kind of looked at that and went, oh, hope so, but that doesn't seem right. And we found out yesterday it's a torn ACL and he'll miss the season. And this is a big loss. Big loss for LSU, no question. And it's just so disappointing because the team has done so much right over the first month of the season. Talking about a team that's gotten off to a 7-1 start, a team that's beaten 3 Power 5 opponents, a team that has not stepped on any landmines in the non-conference, and a team that really feels like it could take the next step in this program to make the NCAA tournament. And they still can. But we'll talk about what this means now that Jalen Reed is not going to be around for LSU the rest of the way. Jalen Reed is obviously your starting 5-man. What he brings to you is a scorer from the front court position and a guy who can take the basketball from the perimeter and attack the rim at 6'10", 240 pounds in a way that most people cannot. He shot the ball last year in SEC play very well. He was a 41% three-point shooter in league games last year, which means opposing bigs that are guarding him are going to have to go guard him at the three-point line. That opens up driving lanes for a lot of players on the perimeter, and LSU's got some guys that can really drive. And that's why he was a big piece to this team. If you heard Matt McMahon at Media Day, at a press conference, on this show, on OTB, he went on with Matt Moscona and post. Like he talked about Jalen Reed and gushed about Jalen Reed in September, about the hard work that Reed had put in, about how he put on some weight. He was still really running well, and he was primed for an all-conference type season. And when I wrote preseason about what I thought about this basketball team, I said, if they're going to be really good, and they're going to be able to compete at the middle or towards the top half of the SEC and be an NCAA tournament team, I believe Jalen Reed needs to play at an all-conference level. And he's not going to because he's not going to be there. Now, that said, he hasn't quite taken on the scoring burden for this team that I thought he might, but he's still averaging 12.5 points per game through 7 games for this team. So that's what you're missing. A big who can attack the rim, can shoot the ball a little bit from the outside, and can be a presence for you in the rebounding game. What do they have behind him? What does this mean for the rest of the guys? Well, Corey Chest has been really, really good and has earned a starting job. That sent Robert Miller to the bench. And Damian Collins, who we thought may miss significant time with that shoulder injury that he suffered at the Greenbrier, was back in action on Tuesday night. And those two guys came in and really did a great job on Tuesday in Reed's absence for basically the entirety of that game. He only played a minute in that game. Chest and Collins in that game combined to grab 13 rebounds. Robert Miller chipped in with 3 offensive rebounds. I think, honestly, with Chest and Collins in the mix, you might be a better rebounding team than Reed. Reed's a good rebounder. Those two guys could be really, really good rebounders. And those two guys, Chest and Collins, are definitely better defensive players than Jalen Reed. Collins is longer. He's not as sturdy, but he's longer and disruptive. And Chest has shown elite athleticism and a want to. And I gave you this stat a lot back on Tuesday night in my postgame story and then yesterday on the show saying, look, these guys were a force defensively at the rim against a really long and athletic Florida State team. Keep in mind, Florida State, every guard is 6'5" and taller, and the two front court guys are 6'10" and 6'11". And they still went 9 of 29 at the rim with Reed out of the game. That is Collins and Chest, and to an extent Miller, and we'll talk about Derek Fountain in a second, but those guys are good defensively and rebounding, no doubt. They limit you offensively because under no circumstance, as far as I've seen, can you give the ball to Damian Collins or Corey Chest either on the perimeter or on the block and expect them to make a move and get a shot. They can't do that. Jalen Reed absolutely can. In the opener against ULM, he went for 20+. In the comeback against UCF, he was a big piece to that. He scored 21 in that one. You're not going to get that from Collins and Chest. And you're also not going to get any three-point production. Damian Collins is in his 4th year at college. Now, he missed a lot of last year due to injury, and we're not very long into the 4th year. We played 8 games. So I'm not counting 4 entire years of college, but he's been in college for 4 years. He's made 1 three-pointer. Corey Chest has not attempted one. So you're not going to get anything on the perimeter from those guys, which allows opposing bigs to sag into the paint and cut off driving lanes. That's a big problem. And you just don't get the offensive punch that you would have with Reed. So how does this change? Well, Jalen Reed was averaging about 12.5 points. I think he was probably going to be about a 14-point-per-game guy if he was playing well. You're not going to get 14 a game from Chest and Collins, I don't think, consistently. But if you can get 9 from those guys, and they can rebound and defend to take 4 or 5 points away, well, now you've got a wash. Now, that's a lot to ask. It's not like Jalen Reed didn't rebound at all or didn't defend at all. It's also not like Chest and Collins can't help you on the backboard and defend. I think the biggest issue here is you lose your stretch big. And it's a big piece to basketball. Obviously, KJ Williams 2 years ago was a big piece to LSU. You had to go out and guard Will Baker last year at the three-point line. LSU now does not have a big that forces you to the three-point line. I think Derek Fountain can shoot it okay. Last year he shot about 32% from 3, and you do have to respect that to a degree, but he's far from a sharpshooter. So this is going to impact Jordan Sears and Cam Carter, and to an extent Victorious Miller, driving because it's going to clog up a little bit. But you're going to gain some stuff on defense. It's a give and take with this trade. I believe this makes LSU a little bit worse. But as I sit here today, and I may eat crow on this, and I'll be willing to say it if I see it, I don't think it's as crippling as I would have thought a month ago. If you would have told me a month ago that Jalen Reed goes down for the year in early December, I would have said they're done. They're absolutely done. But I did not really know if Corey Chest was going to impact this team at all. He is big time. I did not know if Damian Collins was going to step up and live up to that consensus 5-star rating. Defensively, he kind of looks that way right now. And we've seen LSU now play some high-level teams. This is not him just swatting shots against Charleston Southern, which he did do. He was out there against Florida State. That's a mid-tier ACC team. So they've got guys that are going to help that I didn't really count on a month ago. And the good news is, from the day they announced that Damian Collins was out for the year, which was the 4th of December, to the first conference game is a month. They've got a month to figure out what this needs to look like. They've got a game at SMU, and the rest are very manageable home games. You got Florida Gulf Coast, and you got Stetson, and you got Mississippi Valley State. And like you've got some games to get those guys on the floor, Robert Miller included, Derek Fountain included, to see what you can do. Matt McMahon has built some depth on this team, but Reed was very much going to be a key piece, and you lose something in him that you can't truly replace, but you've got to kind of make it work. And we were talking to Matthew Bruni yesterday from the Bengal Tiger on 3, and he was like, look, McMahon played last year with no Damian Collins, and you lost Jalen Cook, and you lost Carlos Stewart, and there were pieces that you were probably going to count on that weren't there, and you figured it out. And that's just what he's going to have to do again. It's going to be difficult because, as we've talked about ad nauseum, the league's very, very good. This is a real gut punch and real disappointing for Jalen Reed, who put so much work in and was seeing it pay off for a team that's playing really good basketball early on in the fall. But you're going to have to move on without him. It's daunting, but I don't think as crippling as we thought it was going to be a month ago. So that's your look at LSU basketball without Jalen Reed moving forward. That's our Genesis opening drive. Every single car on the lot is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. If you're looking for basketball info and you've missed this, it's time to kind of ease into it now that football and signing day in the rearview mirror. My Hoops with Hunt podcast is up and running. You can catch that anywhere you find your podcast. Just search Hoops with Hunt. It is right there, as it always was before we stopped doing it 2 years ago when I didn't think any of y'all cared about basketball anymore, and we were figuring other things to do with this show. So we're back. It's not any new content. It's just going to be repurposed content from this show. If you miss our basketball segments on a given day, would like to hear what I have to say about hoops, don't want to go through an entire show on YouTube or wherever you find your podcast, just go to Hoops with Hunt. All our basketball content will be right there for you. Thursday show is brought to you by Rouse's. We'll come back with JD PicKell of On 3 Sports. That's next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Highland Insurance Group, HighlandIG.com is the website. Jonathan Carbo and his team, fantastic to work with. If all you know, you're a business owner, you're a CFO, and all you know about your insurance program as well, kind of costs a lot, and I'm sick of dealing with all these cold calls and salesmen trying to be pushed. That doesn't have to be your experience. Your insurance can be handled by one broker. It's not like Jonathan Carbo is only anchored to one carrier. No, he's an independent broker, meaning he's got dozens of markets that may be a fit for you and your business. And he'll make sure you're placed in the right place for the right premium, and you have the right coverage so that when something goes wrong, your business can keep on running because insurance will handle the back end of that. It's never a comfortable conversation to have, never a fun conversation to have, but it might be one that really helps your business in a really tough time. That's what insurance does at its best. Jonathan Carbo is willing to help you out with that. He's with the Highland Insurance Group right here in Baton Rouge. You can check him online, HighlandIG.com. It's the Highland Insurance Group, HighlandIG.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets.
Busy day yesterday for the whole crew at On 3. Of course, our local guys, Shea Dixon, Matthew Bruni, that whole gang at the Bengal Tiger were locked and loaded. And national folks didn't exactly get the day off. Real busy day for National Signing Day. JD PicKell, part of the team over at On 3, joins us all Wednesdays except National Signing Day, where he's a little busy, but he's got some time today, and we appreciate him for being flexible and jumping aboard here on this Thursday. JD, did you get some sleep last night?
Hunt, I did, man. I did, but I appreciate y'all first off flexing with me because I'm at the desk and I see that 225 Baton Rouge number pop up, and I was like, gosh, dang it. I completely forgot today's a Wednesday. Because, I mean, you know this, like being in sports media, like you just think National Signing Day is like a day of the week. And so I didn't even realize it was a Wednesday. But all that to say, I appreciate you being gracious and having me on today. Excited to talk some ball.
No, y'all's whole crew rocked it yesterday. Y'all were wall-to-wall coverage from start to finish. It was some really good stuff. Let's talk some college football. Anything that you drew from Tuesday's reveal as we enter Conference Championship Week?
Not really, which is a pretty boring answer. I think the conclusion I've arrived at is I'm okay with the logic that we're using to decide this 12-team field. Like, within the rules of what the college football playoff is right now, the logic is sound. Like, do I think South Carolina is a better team than Alabama? 100%. Do I get why you have to value head-to-head above that? I also, 100%. I respect that. But at the exact same time, like, the bigger issue to me becomes, well, this can't be the way we do things for the next 10 years. Like, this playoff format isn't getting us what we're describing, which is 12 best teams. Like, I'm all for conference title games mattering. I don't think they should matter to the point where you have 5 auto bids with the G5 getting an auto bid, or with, these different schools all having auto bids. And I think the biggest objection to that from other folks will be, well, JD, you don't want to see, the little guy get a chance. You don't want to see Boise State have a chance. I'm like, take the auto bid part out of it. Boise State's a top 10 team in college football right now. If they beat UNLV, any format you want to slice it, like, they are in the college football playoff. Cincinnati made the college football playoff when they were a G5 team in the 4-team model. So, like, I have this issue that we're pretending that we have the 12 best teams, when in reality we have all these back doors to get a number 17 ranked Clemson, a number 15 Arizona State. It's like, let's just handle business regular season. If you're a top 12 team at the end of this thing, we'll go from there.
Where are you on what you did in November versus what you did in September? I mean, we're talking about Miami's win being at Florida, but that one may be the same Florida team. And I'm curious how you weigh how teams are playing late, because that's obviously South Carolina's argument, where Alabama fell on their face and Ole Miss fell on their face, but South Carolina's played great. But you got to, by some people's estimation, take the entire body of work. Where are you on that?
I think it needs to matter in the margins. Like, I think in a situation like with South Carolina, how well they played late, I probably would give them the nod over Alabama if they didn't have that head-to-head. I think the Miami win, you probably have to use the proper context of, well, hey, DJ Lagway wasn't playing for Florida. So, like, as much as that logo looks like a good win on paper, when we go back and look at, the schedule, you got the win-losses next to all of them. It looks good to have a win next to that logo now, but, like, we all understand that's a different-looking team. So, I think it should make a difference in the fine print to some degree, but I do think the beautiful part about college football and what's made the sport what it is in so many different ways is a regular season, from week 0 to conference championship weekend and rivalry weekend. I mean, it all matters to some extent, about the same. And any given weekend can change your season. So I appreciate that part of it. That part of me wants to keep that as much intact as possible. So I'd probably lean towards, like, hey, if you didn't play well to start the year, that sucks. And as much as I think South Carolina is the top 12 team in America right now, again, the logic of it and the way this whole thing is formatted, I think that's probably the way that you have to go.
Does SMU need to win this weekend?
Absolutely. Absolutely needs to win. To get in the college football play. So I said that they need to win. I was thinking more so like just optics, like Rhett Lashley trying to generate some more juice around the program. I think they have to make it respectable. If they get body bagged by Clemson and it's 42-10, just the overall feeling around what they're going to be in the college football playoff committee's eyes is going to be really interesting. I would be wildly surprised if SMU, whether they win or lose, is left out. And that, again, another boring answer, another reason why I have an issue with the college football playoff format of like a number 17 Clemson jumping, what would that be? 6 spots, to like 5 spots to get in the college football playoff feels bizarre. So yes, I do think they need to win in regards to, optics, but I think they could lose and be respectable and still find their way in the dance.
How good's Arizona State?
I think they're good, man. I mean, if how good they are to me is almost secondary to how fun they are. Like, you got a 34-year-old head coach who's cutting promos on the post game every single time. You got a running back who has a name that sounds like a Dr. Seuss character in Cam Scadaboo. Like, you got a transfer quarterback in Sam Levitt who's just, I mean, he apparently, the way that I was told, like, Oregon State was in the mix for him when he was in the portal, and he's like, I was almost Gatorade, or maybe he was Gatorade State Player of the Year in the state of Oregon. Like, y'all didn't want me. Like, I'm good. So, all those things, all that to say is Arizona State's a lot of fun. I would not want to tackle Cam Scadaboo in the first round of the college football playoff, as much as I've just been on my soapbox here for the last few minutes saying you got to be a top 12 team. Here's the thing, too, Hunt. Who's to say that if Arizona State comes out and makes a statement against the Iowa State, if we were shooting it on just top 12 teams, who's to say that we wouldn't consider Arizona State in that group of top 12? I think that's definitely on the table, and Again, they're just, for me, it's all about who they match up with that first round of the college football playoff. I can't wait.
Alabama played 6 brilliant quarters of football throughout the course of a season. I watched 4 of them right there with my own eyes. But I'm asking you, do you want to see Alabama in the college football playoff?
I want to see them in the playoff relative to who else they would be replaced by, if that makes sense. Like, I would take Alabama over Clemson in a heartbeat. And you just mentioned it, like, which Alabama do we see in the college football playoff is a tremendous question. I do think, though, by nature of what they've done in the SEC, I mean, if you told an Alabama fan before the year, hey, you're going to go 2-1 against Georgia, Tennessee, and LSU, will you take that? Like, I think they would in a heartbeat. In Clemson, I mean, the Louisville optics are tough. The game against Georgia is tough. South Carolina didn't even make the playoffs. For them to get left out and Clemson to get in would just feel weird. So I would want to see Alabama in the playoff, again, by nature of what the other options are that I have to pick from.
Ohio State had a pretty good year. They had a bad Saturday. Is it being made too much of because of who it was against, or are there real issues?
They're real issues. They're absolutely real issues. And I think the interesting thing with them, too, is as we look at, like, who they're projected to play in the first round, if it were to hold as it is right now with the seedings, like Knoxville, Tennessee would not be where that game is played, but to go to Columbus, Ohio, and to play Tennessee, sorry, that was a confusing way to say it. I was looking at that bracket the wrong way. They'd play Tennessee in the first round. Tennessee can absolutely do what Michigan did to them in Columbus last Saturday, like 110%. So that's the concerning part. I think the bigger question, too, is, like, psychologically, how do you bounce back from that? Because we saw that team that bounced back with, C.J. Stroud and Marvin Harrison Jr. and just the horsepower that group had when they went and played Georgia and Atlanta in the semifinals. Like, I don't know if this team has that same mechanism to bounce back that way. Like, I wonder if there's that same kind of juice when you look down the barrel of, okay, we got to win 4 games to make the national championship, or 3 games to make the national championship, 4 to win it, as opposed to, like, hey, we're in the semis, we got to beat Georgia. If we do that, we're playing for the national championship. Like, I wonder how that impacts the team, especially, your 4th time in a row for a lot of those guys, like never beating Michigan. Like, I think that's probably pretty jarring psychologically as a competitor.
All right, let's talk about the games coming up this weekend. We know the MO on James Franklin's Penn State teams. This is another big game for them, although they are going to get in, but you're playing for a bye in a conference championship. How do you feel about Penn State's chances to rise to the occasion and play with Oregon?
I think the logos and how we view them right now, I think that gap is a lot wider than what the actual roster talent is. I think it would take the Andy Kolsniecki special. Like, my hope is, if I'm a Penn State fan, that we learn from what happened in Columbus. Like, it has to be get the ball to Tyler Warren, get the ball to Nick Singleton, be creative. I don't think that they are talented enough to play Oregon straight up the way they played Ohio State straight up. So I want to see the creativeness. I want to see the gimmicks. I want to see the quirks. I want to see Tyler Warren snapping the ball and then catching the football afterwards. If they can do that, they have a chance to kind of turn the whole narrative on James Franklin, because we look back at the last time Penn State won the Big Ten in 2016, the class that followed that they were recruiting, it would have been 2018, because 2017 at that point already pretty much locked and loaded. The 2018 class that was benefiting from the Big Ten title, top 5 in America. So if they can do that, they can sort of turn the tide a little bit on the James Franklin era at Penn State and kind of rewrite their own narrative.
Flying Austin to Atlanta or Houston to Atlanta is pretty doable, and Texas has a lot of money, and Georgia's going to fill up the Georgia Dome anyway. So I'm not worried about the SEC championship game attendance. I think it'll be packed. Are you concerned about Big Ten championship game attendance? It's a tough drive for Penn State. It's not drivable for Oregon, and they got playoff games that their fans may want to go to and spend some money on that coming up. So, like, is anybody going to go to that game?
I think there's some part of you, for an Oregon fan, where, just like you said, you're probably saving money for a playoff game. There's a part of me that wonders, with how rabid that fan base is and just how national it feels like that fan base is by nature of the Nike brand and the Oregon logo, and, just a lot of people deciding to live all over the place after going to Oregon. I wonder if it's not important for them to be able to be there for that first Big Ten potential championship. I'm curious, but I think what you're saying is extremely valid. I don't know that it'll be as packed as maybe a playoff game would be if you were to play at a neutral site. I think that's probably the right way to think about it. But, yeah, that's a curious thought. I'll say this, too. I don't know if either way the crowd will make an impact on that game.
I just don't know if anybody's. I mean, I don't question those two fan bases at all for their first playoff game. They'll pack it. Oregon did a good job of flying down to Dallas when LSU played them in 2011, and they'll be there. But this game was just not that significant for either of those games. If you're talking about disposable income, let's go to the SEC championship game. Who you like?
I like Texas, man, and I felt horrible saying that out loud in our show a little bit, just because of what happened last game and because of the final image I had in my mind that made its way around social media, where it's like Kirby Smart telling a ghost story to Holly Rowe after they just beat the brakes off Texas and Austin. The thing for me is going back and watching that game. My little girl this week before the Tuesday show, she's 20 days old now at that point, like in the teens. She's not sleeping, so I'm like, okay, she clearly wants to go back and watch the Texas-Georgia game. So me and her on the couch, 2 a.m. I'm watching that game back. The amount of short fields that Georgia had to work with was, I think, very uncharacteristic of a Texas offense. I think Quinn Ewers was out of rhythm. The second half of that game, you saw a different Texas team, and probably more importantly, that Georgia offense had one true touchdown drive where they had to go the length of the field, and they got a big chunk of it off like a double reverse flea flicker pass. So all that's to say, I'm not 100% sold that what we saw in Austin is all that reliable to happen again. Big thing to watch here. One is the Kelvin Banks injury at the left tackle position. Is he able to be serviceable against the freak shows of Georgia? Second piece, you got to think Steve Sarkisian's watching Georgia Tech, sees Haynes King in the quarterback run game, and he goes, well, Arch Manning is a guy who can wiggle a little bit. You watch back what he did against A&M. I wonder if we see maybe just an extra 20 cc's of the Arch Manning impact here in Atlanta.
We shall see. Appreciate some time, man. We'll talk next week.
I appreciate you, man. Go Tigers.
JD PicKell, host of the Hard Count on 3. Check him out on YouTube. Subscribe up to the channel. Get all your college football information from he and the guys there at On 3. All right, when we come back, some breaking news from LSU football. We'll talk about it next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
One Bath and Closets. OneBathAndClosets.com is the website. David Duvall and his team, 30 years redesigning and remodeling bathrooms and closets. Safety's a big deal in the bathroom, especially as folks age. It can be a really hazardous place. If there's someone in your life that you love that may have some issues that could be hazardous in the bathroom, falls could be a big deal. Do the best to mitigate against that. You can do it with non-slip floors. You can do it with walk-in tubs. You can do it with showers with benches in them. You can do it with handrails around the slippery areas. All those things could be a big help. And they do it all the time at One Bath and Closet. David Duvall is happy to help you with that. Get that free consultation today. Go to OneBathAndClosets.com for that consultation. They've got financing options available as well. Don't delay. Just go today. It's OneBathAndClosets.com. One Bath and Closets. OneBathAndClosets.com.
Okay, This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets.
Thursday show is brought to you by Rouse's Markets. Doing your weekend grocery shopping, get on by a Rouse's location near you. Always invite you to download that Rouse's app. I encourage you to download the Rouse's app. It makes shopping so easy. You can go on in the store, which I think is an incredible shopping experience. They're always clean and very well stocked. Get all the options that you may need, certainly for your holiday parties or for gumbo weather, which is coming up this weekend. But if you don't have time to go in the store, just do your shopping right there on the app. You can pull up next to the entrance. They'll walk right out, put those groceries in the back seat, and you are on your way. Easy as that. Make it easy for you over at Rouse's. Rouse's, this feels like home. Breaking news for LSU football. Mason Taylor has made his decision about his future. The junior tight end will forego his senior season and enter the NFL draft. This is not a surprise. Mason Taylor told us in a media availability back in October at some point that he felt like he was physically ready to play in the NFL. You understand that I don't think he was going to be kicked out the door to the NFL with his family situation, but he felt like he was ready to go, and he's made that decision, and it's not a shock. This is a guy who showed up with Brian Kelly in a tight end room that was pretty much empty. Eric Gilbert had moved on the year before. Cole Taylor had a shoe thrown. He moved on, and they didn't really have a tight end. Jack Mashburn was trying to help him out. He was a high school quarterback. And you understood that Brian Kelly really values the tight end position and has that as a key pillar in his offenses over the years. And so it was basically kind of like Mason Taylor was the guy, and he did not start the opener against Florida State, but after that game, he started every game of his LSU career. And he was ridiculously productive. In fact, the most productive tight end in the history of LSU football. He leads LSU as the all-time leader in tight end receptions, as the all-time leader in tight end yards. He caught 129 passes for 1,308 yards. He scored 6 touchdowns, and of course, most famously made the catch to beat Alabama back in his freshman season of 2022 with a 2-point conversion in overtime. He was fantastic, and I think is prime for a long career in the NFL. He's filled out on that frame. He's 6'5", 255 pounds. He runs certainly well enough. He's got great hands, has made tough catches over the years time and time again, especially on third downs. I think about the 4th down catch that he made, 2 of them, but the one that was contested along the sideline against Ole Miss on that final drive that was awesome. And he was a security blanket for Garrett Nussmeier over the course of this season. A career-best 55 catches for Mason Taylor, a career-best 546 yards for Mason Taylor this year. Also made a touchdown catch in that game against Alabama 2 years ago in the second half in the back of the end zone, which was a huge play in that game. So congratulations to Mason Taylor on a phenomenal career, great representation of LSU. This is a guy who they sent out for player interviews almost every week. We got to talk to, always nothing but pleasant, and was incredibly productive. So best wishes to him as he enters the NFL draft. What does it mean for LSU? Well, you look at LSU, and obviously Mac Markway left in fall camp, and you've got Kamorian Pimpton, who made 2 nice catches in the game against Oklahoma back on Saturday. You've got Trey'Dez Green, who's an immense talent, but you moved to wide receiver midway through the season as well. So you are incredibly thin there with only 2 guys on scholarship, and neither one of them are accomplished blockers in any way. So this is a non-negotiable for LSU at this point. You absolutely must go into the transfer portal and get a 255-pound tight end that can block SEC edges. It's non-negotiable. J.D. LaFleur looks like a heck of a player. It's one of the top tight ends in the country. He's got great bloodlines. His dad, David, was a great player at LSU and became a pick to the Cowboys and was a productive player in Dallas in the NFL. And he's got a big frame. He's 6'7", 245 pounds. I don't want him being thrust into that role immediately as a freshman. That's asking too much. Mason Taylor did it, but it's asking too much. I'm not saying you got to go get a first-team All-American tight end. You don't have to go get Brock Bowers from the Raiders. But you got to go get somebody that can be physical at the point of attack. And the good news is that's not going to cost as much as a quarterback, a number 1 wide receiver, an elite edge rusher, an offensive tackle. Like, this is going to be manageable. And it doesn't necessarily have to come from the elite ranks. You've got some guys that can help you that are going to get better in terms of blocking. This will be Kamorian Pimpton's 3rd year in the program. Trey'Dez Green is a willing blocker. He's not necessarily an able blocker at this point, but he's going to put some weight on. He's always going to be a guy that plays more in the slot and out at wide, but he fills that position. This is something you've got to have now. And I feel like it doesn't have to come from South Carolina or Georgia or Texas A&M or Oklahoma or, I couldn't even get out of the SEC there. I was just trying to go through all these places, and they were all in the SEC. Doesn't have to come from Michigan or Kansas State. You can find somebody from a lower level that's just big and physical. I'm not asking this guy to come in and catch 55 balls like Mason Taylor. He may catch 4, but he needs to look like Logan Stokes. He needs to look like Chase Claymaugh. He needs to look like one of these big physical tight ends that LSU has had really in the Les Miles era. And you got to make that happen over the next month for sure. It's not like LSU's got tight ends. Like as I mentioned, they've got Kamorian Pimpton, they've got Trey'Dez Green, they've got J.D. LaFleur. You add one more, and I think you're okay at that spot, but it's got to be a specific skill set. So that's where LSU will be. I don't imagine this is a huge surprise to LSU. Mason, and this is guessing, but I feel like I've talked to Mason enough times, like probably 10 over the last 10 weeks, last 15 weeks. I feel like I've talked to him enough times to realize that he's got a really level head on his shoulders, and I don't think this is one where he pulled a fast one at LSU. He probably indicated to LSU weeks ago that this is where this was headed. So I think the staff probably understands this. Slade Nagel, your tight ends coach, has moved on. He's now taken the job there at Houston as the offensive coordinator. So you've got a vacant position coach and a position that needs some attention. So right now, Brian Kelly's probably going to have to spearhead that for the time being to make sure they get that accomplished. You got to fill that position and then make sure you grab one in the transfer portal as far as players go. So Mason Taylor, with the most productive tight end in the history of LSU football, moving on to the National Football League, leaves a little bit of a vacancy there at tight end for the Tigers. We'll take a time out. When we come back, we're going to look at SEC Power Rankings, okay? We did this after 1 week of football. I gave you what I thought about the entire league. I'll tell you what I think about the entire league now, then we'll compare them, see how that shakes out over the course of 12 weeks. That's next on The Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com. Saw a Genesis this morning pull out of the old neighborhood. Thought that's a really nice looking vehicle there. It was white, SUV. Looked phenomenal, as the entire line of Genesis do. And you can promise if you sit behind the wheel of a Genesis, you are sitting behind the wheel of an incredibly safe vehicle. The entire line was given the IIHA top safety pick. Some of them were top safety picks plus. It's very evident when you look at a Genesis, the design, how sleek and stylish it is. It's very evident when you sit in a Genesis, how comfortable and nice the interior is. When you drive it, it's very obvious just how great the drive is. You can get a test drive with one of their brand ambassadors. Don't even have to go into the store. They'll come to you. I think it's not obvious is how safe is it. Well, I can promise you it's been tested. The entire line and every car in the line, every vehicle in the line has the same safety features. They don't skimp anywhere on that. It's very important to the folks over at Genesis. Get on by and see them. Airline at Piku. It's Genesis of Baton Rouge. The entire lot is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets.
All right, closing up hour number one here on a Thursday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Markets. Got a lot to do in hour number two. I want to talk defensive tackles. LSU signed 4 of those yesterday and got some talent that's on the roster right now. So I want to talk about what Bo Davis has done to the interior of that defensive line. We'll do that coming up in 15 minutes. But right now, let's get to my final SEC Power Rankings.
Hunt's SEC Power Rankings. The Texas Longhorns.
I got Texas at the top spot. Impressive effort there in Kyle Field to really clamp that team down defensively. Was it the best schedule I've ever seen? No. Did they get annihilated by Georgia on their home field? Yes. Still, I'm going to put Texas at number 1. We'll see what happens in Atlanta this weekend.
The Georgia Bulldogs.
Got Georgia at number 2, moved up a couple spots. Actually moved back one spot. But they didn't have a great effort against Georgia Tech, but they're still, I think, one of the best teams in the league. They're still a national championship threat. Had they had a perfect run of it? No, they weren't great in Oxford, Mississippi, or they were bad in Lexington, too. But body of work suggests probably number 2 is worthy.
The South Carolina Gamecocks.
I moved South Carolina up here significantly. I think they're that good. I think they went to Clemson and were workmanlike. I think Norris Sellers is playing incredible football. I'll take South Carolina against a lot of teams in the SEC. I will put them at number 3 for the time being.
The Tennessee Volunteers.
Vol still have a great defense. Nico's playing better. They run the ball really well with Dylan Sampson. I think they're very, very good. I think they're a threat in the college football playoff. They'll be a real threat if they go to Columbus, Ohio. I think that probably after that they'd have to play Oregon as well, and that's a tough path. But I think Tennessee is good this year. I think they're worthy of that number 4 spot.
The Ole Miss Rebels.
Rebs got all the way up to number 1 for a couple of weeks. They back up to number 5. I'm not sure how much motivation they've got for whatever bowl game's coming, and I don't know what is left on that roster in a month from right now. But a good football team. I think one that could make a run in the playoff if they were to get in. They're just not going to get in, so got them at number 5.
The Alabama Crimson Tide.
Tide might get in, and they look really good at some points, and they look like they're not all that good at some other points. So I think this is fair. I think I would take all of the teams above them on this list against Alabama on a neutral field right now, and I think that's kind of the criteria. So Bama comes in at 6.
The Florida Gators.
The Gators all the way up to number 7. Just beat down Florida State as we thought they would, and that's a heck of a finish to beat Ole Miss, LSU, and Florida State for Billy Napier. Nobody thought that was coming back in September, and they got it done. Credit to the Gators.
Texas A&M!
Aggies move all the way back to number 8. They threatened this list all the way up to number 3 at one point. They were the only unbeaten team in SEC play. Marcel Reed's not great at quarterback. Just great if you let him run for 1,000,000 yards, which we know a team that did do that. They weren't really threatening Texas much of that game. Couldn't produce an offensive touchdown, so they got their flaws. I got them at number 8.
The LSU Tigers.
Tigers at 9 still don't run it great. I don't think the defense is dominant. Do I think they've got a good quarterback? I do. Do I think they're better than all the teams below them on this list? I do, so got them at 9.
The Missouri Tigers.
Got Missouri at 10. Finished the season pretty strong there. Got a victory over Arkansas at home. Brady Cook played well. Now Luther Burden's head of the NFL, so we'll see what's next for Missouri.
The Vanderbilt Commodores.
Leaked in fuel there. They were up in the top half of the league, up at number 8 at one point, and they played solidly much of the year, but they kind of ended with a whimper in Tiger Stadium and then against Tennessee, so Danny drops to number 11.
The Auburn Tigers.
Probably the team that's most talented relative to their ranking on this list, but still, they didn't win enough games this year, and they didn't really do enough to beat Alabama in the Iron Bowl, so got them down to 12.
The Oklahoma Sooners.
Jackson Arnold's in the portal. His first year as a starter was not very good at all. They got a whole new offensive system coming in, and they got to overhaul the whole thing at OU.
The Arkansas Razorbacks.
Hogs finish at 14. They were scrappy. They were plucky. They did a nice job to beat Tennessee. They did a great job to go to Mississippi State and win by 1,000. We thought, okay, this is an Arkansas team that's doing some pretty good things. And that ultimately, they weren't very good. Won 6 games.
The Kentucky Wildcats.
Awful effort. Awful effort this year from Kentucky. They win 1 conference game. It was a big one at Mississippi, but they didn't do anything after that. Bad season for Mark Stoops.
The Mississippi State Bulldogs.
Yesterday in the coming portal season was way been more important to Mississippi State than what they did over the course of the season. 0-8 in league play for the Dogs. So that is my SEC football power rankings at the end. So now let's compare that to where things started at the beginning. Beck, who do you think had the biggest move either up or down from their beginning?
Well, I'd have to guess South Carolina.
Moved up 10 spots from 13 to number 3. And really, there wasn't anyone else that had massive swings. The other 2 that were 3 that were pretty sizable were 5-point swings. Vanderbilt went from the bottom to 11. Oklahoma fell from 8. I didn't think Oklahoma was great at the beginning of the year. I had them at 8, but they fell down to 13. Kentucky, I had up at 10. They had been pretty solid for like 7 years. Bottom fell out, and I don't know if they're going to be able to get that back, so they moved back 5 spots from 10 to 15. Everybody else was kind of in the ballpark. Florida went from 11 to 7, and I got a lot of grief for putting LSU at 6. My Twitter mentions blew up. Tiger Droppings got a hold of me there saying, LSU, that's ridiculous to have them at 6th. Like, how could you pick 6th? Well, they backed up. I got them at 9th. And I don't even think that's unfair. Where would you put
No,
LSU?
it's not unfair at all. I would probably have them from 8 to 10, somewhere like that.
I got them at 9. Florida at 7. Is that good?
They finished the season well. I mean, I don't know that 7 is where I'd have them. I'd probably, I don't know. Yeah, I'd probably have A&M maybe a step above them, but they didn't finish the season well, so it makes sense as to why
they lost their last 3 league games.
Yeah.
Texas versus South Carolina in Indianapolis tomorrow. Who you got?
I'll take South Carolina.
Ooh. So would you put them 1?
I would probably have them 2. And I'd probably have
Georgia 1.
Texas great. It was a great effort against A&M, but they still haven't been. They still like South Carolina is way more battle tested than Texas is.
The only team that didn't get smoked this year was Tennessee. It's the only team that didn't just get blasted.
That was the thing that we said about them all year is that they have such a good defense and running game that they're not going to beat anybody really badly, but they're probably not going to get beat really badly also.
I say that. Ole Miss lost in Tiger Stadium at the end of the game. Ole Miss didn't get blasted. And those are the 2 teams with probably the best 2 defenses, quite frankly. Texas and Georgia have really good defenses, but those 2 teams didn't get smoked. Texas got run off their field by Georgia. Georgia got killed by Ole Miss. South Carolina got killed by Ole Miss, which is better than cat to Ole Miss to be 2 of the top 3 there by a lot. But Tennessee and Ole Miss didn't get crushed. Bama got crushed by Oklahoma. Florida got crushed by a lot of people. A&M got crushed by South Carolina. LSU got crushed by Bama. I mean, you get the point. Like, everybody had a week or 2 where they just did not have it. And that's not been the case dating back into the SEC for the last 15 years. Like, there were 2 or 3 teams that if you were going to beat them, you had to beat them at the end of the game. And it just didn't necessarily materialize this year. The teams that did not get crushed, Ole Miss lost 3 games, including one to Kentucky. And then Tennessee, they beat Alabama, which was really good. But outside of that, what's your bell cow? Like Florida, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt? It's interesting. It was an interesting league this year, and I'll be curious to see how it unfolds in Atlanta coming up on Saturday. One note before we get the end of the break, I don't know if I'll spend a whole segment on it because it's certainly not shocking. Shelton Sampson has entered his name toward the transfer portal. I shouldn't say in because you can't get in yet. It's not open. But he will transfer out of LSU. Just another hit from that class of 2023 that just has not really produced. It was Lance Hurd. It was Deshaun Womack. It was Shelton Sampson. That was the top of that class. And it just
Lance Hurd he did play for T-Star for Tennessee. I mean, I don't know how good he was.
It didn't sound very good.
Yeah.
And look, it's first year starting. He's got 2 more years to play. He might be an All-American by the end of it. But to this point, the guys that LSU signed to help LSU that were at the top of that class 2 years ago, gone. I think Jalen Brown was part of that class. He's at Florida State. I could go look it up, but I wrote about this a couple of months ago when things were a little bumpy for LSU. Like, you would imagine your guys in the middle of their second year would be taking a big jump, and you just look at that group, and it just hasn't to this point. And that's part of this portal era and what signing day is. That sometimes things just don't quite materialize. So that's it for hour number 1. If you missed any of it, catch it on demand anywhere you find your podcasts or your sound. You can find us, and of course, you can find us on YouTube. When we come back, I want to talk about an encouraging position on this LSU roster. Wide receiver, not so much right now, but defensive tackle, I am a little bit encouraged. So let's talk about that when we come back after SportsCenter. Don't go anywhere. It's a Thursday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Audio, video, security solutions, avssla.com is that website. Nothing more important than the safety and security of your family and your home. And for us, Mitchell Fisher and the team at Audio, Video, Security Solutions are the folks that we trusted to handle our security system, and it's been phenomenal. We can arm the burglar alarm and disarm it remotely on the app. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We've got access to cameras that look at the front door and the back door. We can pause. We can zoom in. It's always recording. We don't pay cloud storage fees. It's been incredibly convenient and reassuring for us that we can have that type of technology at our fingertips all the time. And it's because of the folks at Audio Video Security Solutions. Mitchell Fisher's cell phone number right here, 225-439-7920. If you'd like to get that burglar alarm put in, if you'd like to get cameras outside of your home or your business, Audio Video Security Solutions needs to be the phone call that you make. You can also check them online, avssla.com, avssla.com.